The next item on the order paper is a debate on a matter of public importance in terms of Rule 103 in the name of Dr. M.S. Motshekga on the tragic deaths of initiates in Mpumalanga. Honorable Member, while the topic of the debate refers to Mpumalanga, I think members will agree that the death of initiates is a countrywide challenge and problem happening in different parts of the country. Therefore, the debate should not just be confined to Mpumalanga. I now call upon the Honorable Dr. Motshekga.
Honorable Speaker and honorable members of this House, it is with heavy hearts that we gather here today to focus on the loss of innocent and courageously valuable lives of 29 young men aged 13 to 21 years old in the eastern Mpumalanga province, Limpopo, and other parts of the country during this year's circumcision ritual. Another 6 died in the northern Limpopo province. As the ANC, we share President Jacob Zuma's and the country's shock and outrage at the unnecessary loss of life and believe that not only was this avoidable, but that those responsible for this tragedy must face the full might of the law as speedily as possible. One can only imagine how the bereaved families must feel at having their loved ones cut down in the prime of their lives and robbing them of their future which lay before them. In 2010, the Cultural, Religious and Linguistic Rights Commission released one of its research reports titled Public Hearings on Male Initiation Schools in South Africa, and reported that between 2009 and 2010, 145 boys died because of complications related to their circumcision, and another 1,200 were hospitalized. These are alarming statistics, and despite the practice having survived many generations, we may have to re-examine the ways in which it is carried out in the modern age. To understand why male circumcision is important, for instance, among the Xhosas and other cultural groupings, one needs to truly appreciate the reasons why the practice of circumcision has been carried through from generation to generation and its impact on young men as they enter adulthood. As our foremost icon, Nelson Mandela, stated, and I quote, "On Robben Island, not all debates were political. One issue that provoked much discussion was circumcision. Some among us maintained that circumcision as practiced by the Xhosa and other tribes was not only an unnecessary mutilation of the body by a reversion to the type of tribalism that the ANC was seeking to overthrow. It was not an unreasonable argument, but the prevailing view in which I agreed was that circumcision was a cultural ritual that had not only a salutary health benefit, but an important psychological effect. It was a rite that strengthened group identification and inculcated possible values." I close the quote. Despite being mindful of all the associated risks, the African youth chose to undergo traditional circumcision as it is regarded as a sacred rite of passage and also speaks to one's family honor and standing in our society. Given our country's fractured past, the intolerance and subordinate status given to African culture and its practices in apartheid South Africa, we must be mindful to educate and sensitize those who wish to demean the practice completely. Whilst the death of initiates during these rituals and the scarring and substandard medical procedures they are exposed to cannot be condoned and must be vehemently denounced, we must also pay heed to the cultural and spiritual significance of the act, in which we may proceed to engage on this issue. Let us ensure that we do so within the spirit and letter of our progressive constitution, which calls for respect and tolerance of the diverse cultures and the right of individuals, communities, or groups to practice and enjoy these rights, while observing and respecting the rights of others. More significantly, we must acknowledge that there is still significant support for the practice of the ritual within African communities. Our icon, Nelson Mandela, expressed the significance of circumcision as follows, and I quote, "In my tradition, an uncircumcised male cannot be heir to his father's wealth, cannot marry or officiate in tribal rituals. An uncircumcised Xhosa man is a contradiction in terms, for he is not considered a man at all, but a boy. For the Xhosa people, circumcision represents the formal incorporation of males into society. It is not just a surgical procedure, but a lengthy and elaborate ritual in preparation for manhood. As a Xhosa, I count my years as a man from the date of my circumcision. It was a sacred time. I felt happy and fulfilled taking part in my people's customs and ready to make the transition from boyhood to manhood." I close the quote. It is easy to see why Madiba felt this way and why many others who practice this tradition believe in it so completely. This rite of passage is not just an individual occurrence or experience. It is that of the entire community, for it guarantees the continuation and legacy of the values, ideals, norms, and morals of the community. Madiba correctly observed that African initiation schools have both a spiritual and cultural significance. The spiritual underpinnings of African initiation schools were never appreciated because under colonialism and apartheid, African religion was regarded as a superstition and suppressed. Institutions and rituals were despised and forced underground. The transformation of African initiation schools cannot be separated from the broad social transformation that includes the revival, mainstreaming, and harnessing of African religion for moral, cultural, social, and economic development. It is therefore necessary to share with those that think that there is nothing called African religion what this belief system is all about. Madiba said that African religion is no longer a superstition that must be replaced by other religions. When I grew up in Bulobedu, the land of Queen Mujaji, I was taught that the universe and humanity were created by the Prince of Light called Kosana, and that Muhali Muhulu, the wife of Kuzana, introduced female initiation called Vyale, derived from the word Muhali. Tovela, the son of Kuzwane, and Muhali Muhulu introduced male initiations called Budika, solidarity, and Buhwera, brotherhood. These gods were spiritual beings who lived on earth in physical form after the creation of the universe and humanity. Kuzwane left footprints on certain rocks when they were still soft. These footprints are still there today and are symbols of divinity. Before they ascended to heaven, these gods introduced initiation schools and laid down the rules governing them. From time immemorial, therefore, initiation schools were governed by spiritual and cultural values. Types of initiations. The Balobedu and Bapedi, for instance, generally had initiation ceremonies that comprised two stages: a circumcision school, Budika, and brotherhood, Buhwera, schools, which completed the status change and marketed the formation of a brotherhood or regiment. This brotherhood has both spiritual and military aspects. It is spiritual aspects initiation into this brotherhood, like girls' initiation, is governed by the bed of Muhale, which symbolizes the Queen of Heaven, Muwariwadenga in Shona and Lozwi. The boys were circumcised in order of precedence and then secluded in the lodge for about 3 months. Here, the brothers Vahwera were taught a number of secret formulas and songs and instructed in the physiology of sexual relations, the dangers of intercourse with a woman in a state of pollution, and in the absolute necessity for obedience to political authorities. These were accompanied by inter alia ordeals and food taboos or abstinences to drive the lessons home. These painful forms of discipline ended with a military raid or a lion hunt. The brotherhood, Budika, was generally arranged by the king or queen and councillors, who appointed a master of ceremonies and his deputy to oversee the school, and also a specialist circumciser, Tipane, to perform the actual operation. A day was announced and boys from all over the kingdom, accompanied by their mothers and with shaven heads and new loincloths, flocked to the royal court. There was a special mystery, the fire mystery, in which boys and girls combined in a ritual symbolizing the importance of political authority, which involved lighting a fire by drilling fire Motshekga muoto on a floating raft of reeds or rubbing 2 sticks. My name, Motshekga, comes from this exercise. This ritual also symbolized the divinity or holiness of sexual union between men and women. Last but not least, the boys and girls were presented to the Queen of Heaven, Muwariwadenga, and then washed and anointed with red oil to confirm the sacred or spiritual nature of initiation. It is clear, therefore, honorable members, that initiation, despite
Honourable members, the noise level in the House is just too high, it's just too much. Those who feel the urge should discuss are free to go outside and discuss outside the chamber. Proceed, sir.
Honorable Speaker and honorable members, it is quite clear, therefore, that initiation schools are not matters of heathenism or paganism. They have spiritual and cultural aspects. All that we have to deal with are the abuses that take place there to prevent the death and injury of our beloved children. The socio-economic challenges and resulting poverty, dysfunctionality of families, single mothers, child-headed families, incidences of HIV, AIDS, and opportunistic diseases, and moral decay and cultural confusion in some traditional communities requires a social dialogue on these challenges and their impact on initiation schools. Such a dialogue would educate the public and aid the transformation of these initiation schools. It is also important to say something about how these schools were established, because what happened today, any person from the street can establish these schools, which is partly why we are where we are today. In general, a father would decide that the time had come to circumcise his son, and would typically arrange with other homesteads with sons of about the same age to establish an initiation lodge or school and engage a specialist circumciser to perform the operation. Permission to establish the lodge or school had to be obtained from the king or chief first. The initiator was termed the father of the lodge, and it was he who acted as master of ceremonies throughout this initiation period. When sons of chiefs were initiated, their fathers fulfilled this role, and it was a great honor for a boy to be a member of a lodge at which a royal child was initiated. On the day of the commencement of the rites, the boys gathered at the home of the lodge, where a sacrifice was made of an uncastrated bull or ram to inform the gods and ancestors of what is taking place. Again, an indication that this practice has a religious and spiritual foundation. Both the bull and the ram were symbols of God. At this ceremony, the initiates were addressed by older men on how to conduct themselves, while in the lodge and they were exhorted to put away all
Honourable Member,
childish
your time has
things.
expired.
I thank you, Honourable Speaker, for the opportunity to present this.